Cool. All right, so I'm gonna go through, and it's a good segue from Jean's presentation. I actually went through the guide. So I'm a product manager, and if I was able to get through it and actually deploy a rollup, I'm sure the hackers should fend well with that guide. So with that, I'll jump right in. So at least for my segment specifically, I'm more interested into how you actually leverage that rollup that you're actually going to be deploying, and how you start interacting with it, how you start building applications on top of it, on top of those rollups. So with that in mind, so I'll give us a quick context about me and about who I am and why I'm here. Some CI/CD principles that I think I hope are all helpful in your journey with the hackathon and with Espresso. Then conceptualizing some contract pipelines, and then I'll give you a hack tip. And I hope it's helpful, and it drives some interesting projects at the end of the hackathon. So let's jump right in. So my name is Gabriel. Call me Gabe, it's shorter. I'm a product manager at Infura and MetaMask developer. So if you haven't noticed, Infura is now a SIP product under MetaMask developer. So we're looking to do a much tighter integration between wallets and infrastructure. And so at least in terms of my background and why what I'm going to be talking about is relevant. So early in 2017, I was working in a big, large-scale smart contract project for a bank. So we were basically developing or simulating credit default swaps on an Ethereum-like blockchain, and I had to develop a custom smart contract framework, very similar to what we have today, like in terms of a Foundry or Hard Hat. And this was a very early on version of Solidity, so version 0.4 I think it was like 17. So I know a lot of the pain points of developing smart contracts. Back then, this was a private ledger. Now we're talking about L2, L3 rollups. So really interesting stuff and how things have evolved. So with that, I will jump right in. So also a reminder, we also have a coupon, Brew 325, in case you need an RPC provider with MetaMask developer / Infura. As you go through the process of onboarding and you want to get a higher developer tier, it'll be free for you for the hackathon. So feel free to leverage this coupon when you're signing up, or if you already have an account, you can feel free to upgrade. All right, so setting up some context before I jump in, and apologies, I won't be doing live code. I've been having issues with my computer, and I think the code setup I have right now is a bit fragile, so I'm not sure if it would work, but nonetheless, going through kind of these criteria of what I'm going to be talking about, one of the main objectives of the hackathon, right, is deploying to decaf, right? That's we got to get this done. We got to get it done properly. There's I think another workshop after mine that's around the open intents framework. So really interesting and very relevant to what we're going to be talking about, because as you're developing on open intents, these are smart contracts. You're going to be iterating on them, and so you want to have a really good, solid foundation for actually having a repeatable process to deploy and test these contracts on a rollup. And then lastly, rollup verification. So making sure that the rollup is actually live and working, and perhaps someone can actually even use it. And at the end, I'll give you kind of like a hack tip in terms of how you can get this done in case you have issues with AWS and setting things up. So with that, I'll jump into some CI/CD principles. So I'll go through some like 3 principles that I typically kind of have leveraged in the past, and in my experience developing some of these things regarding CI/CD and contract development. So use boilerplates. So don't start from scratch. Sometimes as developers and engineers, we get too curious and we want to start everything from zero. Hackathons, we want to move quickly. We want to show results as quickly as possible. So leverage a boilerplate. And my recommendation is ETH Scaffold-2. I actually went through this yesterday. I set it up, interacted with the rollup. Everything went well. So I recommend this. It has everything that you need. It even has CI/CD pipeline set up for you. And it has a ready-made front end for you to start interacting with those rollup contracts. And also has a wallet connectivity in case you want to have some nice demos at the end of the hackathon. So the other piece is automation. So if you're probably going to be doing something more than 3 times, definitely, we want to make sure we can automate it. So one of the things that, as I was going through this, it was like, we have to like have this is basically deploying to that local rollup. So basically set up your hard hat, or if you have Foundry setup, whatever it is that you're using, set that up, at least and I have a repo that I can share afterwards. But basically this is my network setup for actually being able to interact with that rollup, which is basically local host at port 8547. And so with that, you can actually start, with your whatever smart contract framework you're actually interacting with, you'll be able to deploy contracts and interact with that local rollup, which is basically what we saw in the previous workshop with Sean. And so a quick tidbit on this, actually, that I had issues if you're working on a Mac, is localhost wasn't working for me. So you have to use, the actual IP address for localhost, which is 0000. Cool. So that said, and then the other piece is, it's fancy and appealing to automate things, but just make sure it's working locally before you actually go out and put any of this stuff in a pipeline in GitHub and start working some of those GitHub actions. So at least for me, so I was able to actually, configure that smart contract framework and deploy some of these test contracts that come pre-baked into the the Scaffold-ETH project. And so was able to, get up the rollup, deploy some of these contracts, run some tests. So, you should be, this should get you up into a good framework so that you can, start developing and iterating with whatever application you'll end up developing for the hackathon. Cool. So I'll be moving on. Let me just check here. So conceptualizing contract pipelines. So as I mentioned previously, I have some background on this in the past. And so, the way I think about this, it's two terms, right? So continuous integration, continuous deployment. So you want to do the continuous integration to make sure that as you're moving new code forward, you're integrating that into the code base with high confidence. If you're in a team setting, this is extremely important. So you want to make sure that you have this set up so that as different people are contributing to the code base, you're not falling behind on different pieces of code, different pieces of functionality. And so that's why, you want to get this done early so you don't face issues, especially at the end of the hackathon when you're kind of scrambling to connect things and get things done and everything's failing. And then continuous deployment, this is actually, it's not something that's oftenly done in smart contracts, but it can be done. And it's once the code is, you have high confidence, it's been tested, it's integrated, you see these pipelines are always green. We feel good about deployment and about deployment quality. There's this comment I had about deployment and delivery, at least in smart contracts, is really deployment. We're not delivering packages here, so I have to get into it. Contract integration. So a typical pipeline looks like this. The Scaffold-ETH project actually comes with something very similar to this already, by default, where you have like a lint build test type of phases for those smart contracts in that project. And then at the end, there's like this deploy piece, which you can be flexible. It could be on that hard hat node or Foundry, I think it's Forge, that you can actually deploy these contracts and test them if you'd like to add this to increase confidence, especially if there's like interactions between different instances of contracts. And then continuous deployment. So, I think we can get creative here and actually do this from GitHub Actions, at least for this hackathon, is, as you end up in this deploy phase, you can actually deploy to either testnet or mainnet. Most likely testnet can be automated. For mainnet, I wouldn't recommend actually automating something like this. And this is something that typically will happen offline. But if you get there, kudos. I think that would be wonderful and impressive, because deploying to mainnet is not light. All right, so this is kind of the Scaffold-ETH CI. So if you adopt the scaffolding of this project, you'll basically get this out of the box and you can modify and edit it. I modified some of the files to get this done in a cleaner way and also to work with my deployment locally. But yeah. And then one last hack tip I want to offer is that if your AWS deployment gets complicated for a variety of different reasons, AWS is complicated in general, So setting up infrastructure is not a light thing to do, especially for a hackathon. There's costs involved, there's configurations involved, etc. Something that you can actually do is you can implement some tunneling with ngrok. So this would actually allow you to, from your CI/CD or from UIs, be able to interact with your rollup or your smart contracts in your rollup from externally. So this would be great for you from a demo perspective. Hackathons are typically always about the visual candy of what you can show. And obviously with some of these infrastructure components in mind, you want to make sure that you have that set up locally working fine. If it's a testnet or even mainnet, locally should work fine. But with ngrok, you can focus more on Espresso, focus more on the hackathon, rather than necessarily focusing on mangling AWS and infrastructure problems, which is sometimes not easy to handle. And then some visualization, right? So if you set up an ngrok tunnel, you can basically deploy from your CI/CD. If you're working in a team, I think this would be a great addition, because that CI/CD pipeline, one person in the team can basically focus on hosting this stuff and managing the infra, and then the CI/CD pipeline can actually tunnel the interactivity to the rollup and interact with the rollup. And you can actually also have like a UI, say on Vercel, for example, or on any other provider that interacts with that rollup, and you can also focus on things there. So with that said, I think I should be done. I can open it up for questions. I believe space for 1 or 2 questions. So that's kind of my part. Any questions for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Can open it to questions if anyone has. We do have one comment that we got someone saying thank you. This is what he's been looking for. He's been looking for CI/CD use cases for smart contracts. Nice. That's good. And awesome. We'll certainly have this video up on YouTube as well for everyone, participants to view after the fact. If they do have questions, I'm not sure if the full schedule, but I know that we'll be hosting some office hours, and I'm sure if there are questions specific for you that we can reach out. Are you on Twitter? Do you want to share your handle or anything like that?
Awesome. Yeah, I have a Twitter. I'll also be on the Discord. You can typically find me as Gabe Smadi. I'll drop it in the chat or. So if any questions, I also went through the rollup deployment, had some issues as well, but so if anyone has any questions on that, I can certainly help. Awesome.
Oh yeah, for sure. And there's a little banner, got your thing up there. That's how people can reach you. Awesome. Cool.
Hey, Gabriel, I have a question actually. First, I think it was a great short but very concise way that developers can just like start building faster. But as a product manager mindset, going beyond like it's very different the way a developer approach things from a way like a product person approach things. How was it like knowing the intents and the 2 tracks on the hackathon, knowing that the first track is more about like, okay, learn how to deploy a rollup, and here's like even some toolings for you to make it like a little bit more optimized, but going to like tracking composability, how you with like a product mindset would go for it?
Yeah, it's okay, hear me. It's a good question. I think the composability, so there's 2 tracks, right? The composability and the intents framework integration. I think and we don't see too much about on this yet in the ecosystem, so I'm really excited to see some of these particular applications about how you actually get some of these different chains, different rollups to interact with each other, and what particular applications might there be. So at least something that it goes back again to some of those early experiences that I had in my early days working with blockchains is so this permissioned ledger that I used to work on, it had this kind of privacy, I would say. They were like very similar to rollups, and you could actually interact from contracts from one rollup to another So I'd be curious to see applications on this end, like how you get these like contracts between chains interacting with each other. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think like you got from a place of curiosity, and I would love like also a place from a problem.
What was that?
I would love to see something coming from a problem that you see.
Oh, I see. Oh, definitely. Yeah, use cases. Absolutely. Yes,
Exactly what you
yes.
mentioned comes from a place of curiosity, like, oh, I would like to see that. But like I would love also like, oh, which problem should we tackle first? I know like
Yeah,
composability and like interop is a huge problem, right? But with so much ideas, maybe like, okay, what should I go first? Where is the big opportunity?
Yeah, so I mean, at least, I don't have a particular take on this, like in terms of, particular use cases or problem sets to actually focus on. I think, the one that I mentioned that I had some context was about privacy. And these rollups don't necessarily have to be public, right? They can be private, I mean, and I think that's totally fair. And then validating that, the chain is integral and, there's no tampering, right? So I think that could certainly be, particular use cases if anyone has anything in mind on this front. This is extremely important for financial transactions, right? So particular where I am coming from this angle is like financial derivatives between banks. So I mean, it's, I think, a big problem. It's a big market, right? Value-wise. So yeah.
True. It's something we didn't brought to the database of ideas, but like privacy purpose related chains and like use cases privacy.
Definitely.
Yeah, and especially if we look right now how the Ethereum ecosystem is having this huge wave of like institutional onboarding.
Yeah.
I like it. I like this momentum. Gabriel, thank you so much for being here with us, for hosting the session. We're gonna make sure to make all the cuts in the playlist, so you can also bring even like broadcast more for other devs. I just think this helped a lot of them, even they already comment about this. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Happy to help. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.